June 6, 1944. The weight of an impossible machine. June 6, 1944. Gold Beach, Normandy coast. 6:18 hours. The tide is still rising when the first ramps slam down. Cold gray water rushes across steel decks and into boots. The air smells of cordite, wet canvas, and churned sand. To the east, the sky flickers with naval gunfire, each flash followed seconds later by a rolling concussion that hits the chest like a hammer. Men move forward because there is nowhere else to go. On the far edge of the surf, a shape emerges that does not belong. It is low and wide, its slab sides streaked with salt and exhaust soot. The tank's tracks bite into the sand and do not stop. It is heavier than any British infantry tank that has come before. 40 tons of steel, concrete, mortar, ammunition, and engineer equipment rolled into one machine. The Churchill AVRE pushes inland as if gravity itself has lost interest. Inside the hull, Captain John Milner, Royal Engineers, grips the periscope handles with both hands. He feels the engine vibration through his boots and up his spine. Every briefing, every skeptical glance from staff officers, every remark about weight and reliability echoes in his head. Too heavy, they said. Too slow. Too complicated. Not fit for a modern landing. The tank does not care. The first mine detonates under the right track. The explosion lifts sand and water into the air, but the Churchill barely lurches. The track keeps turning. Another blast follows, then another, each dull thump transmitted through the hull like a distant door slam. The crew braces for the kill that never comes. The minefield is doing exactly what it was designed to do and failing. Ahead of them, the beach defenses loom into clarity. Steel obstacles half submerged. Dragon's teeth concrete blocks wet and dark. A trench cut deep into the shingle with a machine gun position beyond it. Infantry are pinned at the waterline, crouched behind whatever scrap of cover they can find. Some stare openly at the tank as it passes. Others follow behind it, instinctively knowing, without being told, that this is where safety lives. The Churchill AVRE slows at the trench. The driver, Sergeant Tom Reeves, eases the controls forward. The nose dips, then rises as the tank climbs. A massive fascine bundle lashed to the front breaks loose and drops cleanly into the gap. The tank rolls over it, crushing timber and brush into the earth, and keeps going. Where there was a barrier, there is now a crossing. Behind them, another AVRE lumbers forward, its turret carrying a short, thick spigot mortar that looks absurdly oversized. The petard weapon fires with a thunderous cough, launching a flying dustbin charge toward a concrete bunker. The shell hits, and there is a flash of white and brown. When the dust clears, the embrasure is gone, and the gun inside it with it. On the beach, a Royal Engineers sapper named William Carter watches from behind a steel obstacle, his hands shaking too hard to light a cigarette. He had seen the diagrams. He had helped load the equipment. He had heard the jokes about rolling coffins and overweight monsters. What he sees now is a machine doing the work of dozens of men under fire. Mines are exploding that would have torn infantry apart. Trenches are being crossed in seconds. Obstacles meant to stop an army are being erased one by one. Further offshore, more shapes grind toward land. Flail tanks whipping chains into the sand. Bridge layers lowering steel spans. Bulldozers armored just enough to survive long enough. They move with a deliberate, stubborn confidence born not of speed, but of certainty. This is what they were built to do. Above them, shells scream in from the sea and burst inland. The ground shakes constantly. Smoke drifts low and thick. Somewhere to the west, a tank burns bright orange, but the AVREs do not divert. Their orders are simple and absolute. Clear the way. Captain Milner watches through his periscope as infantry surge forward behind his hull. He feels a strange calm settle in his chest. The argument is over now. The calculations, the memos, the doubts have all been answered in steel and fire and motion. This tank was never meant to be elegant. It was meant to be inevitable. As the Churchill climbs off the beach and onto the inland road, its tracks still clotted with sand and blood the minefield behind it lies silent. A path has been cut where none should have existed. And for the first time that morning, the impossible feels not just achievable, but already done. Before Normandy, the machines no one wanted. The argument had begun years earlier, far from the surf and smoke of Normandy. In a drafty conference room in southern England in the winter of 1942, officers leaned over maps and sketches while rain tapped against the windows. The war had turned, but only just. The memory of Dieppe was still raw. Burned tanks on a shingle beach. Engineers shot down while trying to clear obstacles by hand. Everyone in the room knew that another frontal assault against fortified coastlines would end the same way if nothing changed. Lieutenant General Sir Percy Hobart stood apart from the table, his hands clasped behind his back. He was already a problem before he spoke. Forced out of the army once for being difficult, then brought back because no one else understood armored warfare the way he did. Hobart listened while objections filled the room. Tanks too heavy for landing craft. Vehicles too specialized. Crews would never master the equipment in time. Logistics would collapse under the weight. When Hobart finally spoke, it was quiet and precise. He did not argue in theory. He talked about tasks. Minefields that had to be cleared under fire. Ditches that stopped armor cold. Concrete that laughed at standard guns. If infantry could not move, armor could not move. If armor could not move, the landing would die on the beach. His solution was not a single tank, but a family of them. Vehicles that did one job and did it brutally well. Flails to detonate mines. Aviaries to breach concrete and fill gaps. Bridge layers to cross anti-tank ditches in seconds. Tanks that carried engineers' tools instead of elegance. The Churchill infantry tank became the foundation not because it was loved, but because it endured. Slow, tall, heavy. Its early reputation was dreadful. Breakdowns, underpowered engines. Crews cursed it openly. But it climbed where others stalled and kept moving after hits that killed lighter machines. Hobart saw past the complaints. He saw volume and torque and track length. He saw a platform that could be abused and survive. Opposition came fast and from every direction. Naval planners worried about weight limits. Armored officers dismissed the designs as gimmicks. Some American observers were openly skeptical, preferring speed and firepower over engineering tricks. There were whispers that Hobart was fighting the last or not the next one. Trials were ordered partly to test the machines and partly to make them fail. On training grounds in Britain, aviaries crawled toward mock defenses while observers watched with notebooks and folded arms. Mines were detonated under tracks. Charges were fired at concrete walls. Fascines were dropped into trenches. Again and again the machines did what they were built to do. Even then approval came slowly. Numbers were cut. Units were limited. Only a fraction of the invasion force would carry these strange vehicles. Enough to prove a point perhaps, but not enough to convince everyone. Training was relentless and unforgiving. Royal engineers and tank crews were thrown together and told to learn each other's language. Mistakes were punished in steel and bruises, not memos. Fascines broke loose at the wrong moment. Charges misfired. Tanks bogged down and had to be dragged free. Every failure was dissected and drilled again until it stopped happening. Captain John Milner had been there then, too younger and leaner, his hands raw from handling cables and explosives. He remembered the looks from other units when the aviaries rolled past. Amusement, pity, sometimes outright contempt. He also remembered the first time his crew dropped a fascine cleanly under time pressure and crossed a trench that infantry could not. The silence afterward had felt like victory. By early 1944, the decision was final. The machines would go in with the first wave. Not everywhere. Not in overwhelming numbers. But enough. Hobart did not celebrate. He simply went back to work, drilling his men harder than anyone else. He knew exactly how thin the margin was. Now on the Norman coast, that margin was being spent second by second. The aviaries were proving their worth in detonations and crushed obstacles. But the beach was only the beginning. Beyond it waited villages, hedgerows, and prepared defenses that had never been tested against anything like this. As the specialized tanks pushed inland, radio traffic crackled with urgency. New mine belts, unexpected ditches, strongpoints still firing. Each call was answered by steel and problem-solving under fire. The machines no one wanted were becoming the backbone of the advance. Somewhere far behind the lines, planners who had doubted Hobart would read the reports later. They would see the cleared lanes, the reduced casualties, the speed of the breakout. But for the men on the ground, none of that mattered yet. What mattered was that when they faced something that should have stopped them cold, a tank arrived that refused to stop. The beach opens under fire. By mid-morning, the beach has changed shape. What had been a killing ground of water and steel is now a corridor of movement. Wreckage lies everywhere, twisted landing craft, shattered obstacles, burnt vehicles half buried in sand. But through it all, lanes have been carved, deliberate and unmistakable. White tape flutters low to the ground, marking safe passage where mines no longer sleep. A Churchill flail tank advances with its drums, spinning chains hammering the sand ahead of it in a violent metallic blur. Each strike triggers a detonation that sends fountains of grit skyward. The noise is constant, deafening, a rolling crash that drowns out rifle fire and screams. Behind it, infantry move, bent low, their eyes fixed on the tracks that promise survival. They step exactly where the tank has stepped and nowhere else. At the edge of a dune, a German 88 opens fire. The first round screams overhead and detonates inland. The second slams into the beach short of the tanks, sending shards of steel through the air. The gun crew works fast, well-drilled, confident in their position. They have killed armor before. An AVRE pivots its hull toward the threat. Captain Milner gives the order, and the petard fires. The recoil rocks the tank violently. The shell arcs slowly, almost lazily, toward the bunker housing the gun. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then the concrete face of the emplacement erupts outward in a cloud of dust and broken stone. When the smoke clears, the 88 is silent. Further along the shore, another AVRE faces a seawall higher than expected. The tide has pushed water hard against it, turning the base into slick mud. Infantry are trapped against it, taking fire from above. The tank noses forward, tracks slipping then biting. Engineers work from the rear under fire, hauling explosive charges into position. The petard fires again at near point-blank range. The wall collapses inward, leaving a jagged breach. Men rush through without waiting for orders. The weight that had worried planners now becomes a weapon. Mines meant for lighter vehicles detonate harmlessly beneath the Churchills. Obstacles designed to tear off tracks fail against sheer mass. The tanks do not dodge danger. They absorb it. Radio reports flow back to the ships offshore. Lanes cleared. Casualties lower than expected. Armor inland ahead of schedule. The language is clipped, almost disbelieving. On one destroyer, an officer circles a map location twice, then stops, as if expecting the pencil to be wrong. Not everything goes cleanly. One AVRE takes a direct hit that jams its turret. The crew continues anyway, switching roles, manually hauling equipment under fire. Another tank bogs down in soft sand and becomes a target. Smoke is laid down and a recovery vehicle lurches forward, towing it free inch by inch, while bullets stitch the haze. Private William Carter moves with a demolition team behind an AVRE, its hull scarred and blackened. He watches the tank take hit after hit, sparks flashing along its armor. Each time it keeps moving. The presence of it changes everything. Men stand taller. Orders are shouted with confidence. Fear does not vanish, but it becomes manageable. Inland, the first village looms, low stone buildings, tight roads, and sunken lanes. The Germans have mined the approaches and sighted machine guns to sweep them. A flail tank enters first, chains flinging dirt and metal into the air. An AVRE follows close behind, its fascine already unlashed. A ditch appears suddenly, deep and wide. The fascine drops. The tank crosses without slowing. Infantry flood across behind it before the defenders can react. From an upper window, a German soldier fires a Panzerfaust. The rocket strikes an AVRE on the side plate, exploding in a flash of smoke and flame. The tank shutter stops for a second, then moves again. The crew does not know yet that the hit failed to penetrate. They only know that they are alive and still advancing. By noon, Gold Beach is no longer a line, but a depth. Supply vehicles roll ashore. Guns are brought up. Engineers continue their work, marking, clearing, repairing. The specialized tanks move, constantly responding to calls wherever the advance falters. Captain Milner climbs briefly out of his hatch to get a better look. The smell is overwhelming. Burning fuel, explosives, churned earth. He can see far enough now to understand what is happening. The beachhead is holding not by luck or sheer courage, but because the problems that usually kill an assault have been neutralized in minutes instead of hours. He drops back inside as fire cracks nearby. There is no time to think beyond the next obstacle. Somewhere ahead, another minefield waits. Another ditch. Another bunker. And somewhere beyond that, the war will widen into hedgerows and fields where these machines will be tested again in new ways. For now, the impossible weight keeps rolling forward, leaving behind a beach that no longer belongs to the defenders. Inland, where the real test begins. Past the dunes, the land closes in. Norman hedgerows rise thick and ancient, their roots sunk deep into earth, packed hard by centuries of rain and hooves. They are walls, not fences. For standard tanks, they are traps. To crest one is to expose the thin belly to waiting guns. Infantry know this already. The firing has not stopped, just shifted closer, sharper, more personal. An AVRE noses up to the first hedgerow and stops. The driver waits while engineers dismount and move forward, bent low. Small arms crack from somewhere ahead. Dirt jumps at their feet. They fix charges against the packed earth and scramble back. The explosion punches a clean gap through living roots and stone. The tank surges forward through the breach, steel grinding against earth. Infantry pour after it, shouting as if noise alone can carry them through. German defenders adapt quickly. Mines are now laid not in neat belts, but scattered and irregular. Teller mines linked together. Booby traps in doorways. A Churchill rolls over one and detonates a chain reaction that lifts it slightly off the ground. When it settles, the engine still runs. The crew exchange a glance, then keep going. A crossroads comes under fire from multiple directions. An anti-tank gun hidden behind a hedge opens up, hitting the lead tank square in the front. The shell bounces. The AVRE turns its turret slowly, deliberately, as if offended. The petard fires. The hedge erupts outward in a cloud of leaves, dirt, and shattered wood. When it clears, the gun is gone. Radio chatter grows frantic. The advance is faster than planned. Units are intermingling. Requests come in rapid succession. Need a lane cleared. Need a ditch crossed. Need a bunker reduced now. Hobart's machines fan out, answering one problem after another like a toolbox thrown open on the battlefield. Not all of them survive. A flail tank takes a hit that ignites its fuel. The chains fall silent. The crew bails out under fire, 2 men wounded, dragged clear by infantry who refuse to leave them. Another AVRE is immobilized by a broken track. It becomes a static strongpoint, its guns still firing, its hull shielding men behind it. Captain Milner's tank pushes into a farm complex, stone buildings arranged around a muddy yard. Fire pours from a barn converted into a strongpoint. Infantry are pinned behind a low wall. Milner orders the petard loaded. The crew heaves the heavy charge into place, sweat mixing with grime. The shot smashes into the barn wall. The structure collapses inward, timber and stone burying the firing position. The infantry surge forward without waiting. Private Carter follows close behind the tank, his heart hammering. He feels something like gratitude toward the machine. It is ugly, scarred, and loud, but it is reliable in a way nothing else here is. When it moves forward, he moves forward. When it stops, he digs in. His world has shrunk to the space behind its tracks. By afternoon, reports confirm what no one had dared hope. The beach exits are secure. Armor and artillery are moving inland in strength. Casualties are high but survivable. The defenses that were meant to hold for days are unraveling in hours. Word filters through the units in fragments. Other beaches are not as fortunate. Where specialized armor is absent, progress is slower, bloodier. Obstacles have to be cleared by hand under fire. Tanks burn on the sand. The contrast is stark and impossible to ignore. As evening approaches, the AVREs continue their work in failing light. Headlamps remain off. Orders are passed by radio and hand signal. The tanks are tired. Crews are exhausted. But the machines keep going because they must. Somewhere in the rear, Hobart listens to reports coming in piece by piece. He does not smile. He knows the price paid and the price still to come. But he also knows that the argument that haunted him for years has been settled in the only currency that matters. Steel over sand. Weight over theory. Engineers over doubt. As darkness falls, the tanks finally halt in hedgerows and lanes, engines idling quietly. Men eat cold rations in the shadow of armor that has carried them further than anyone predicted. Tomorrow the fighting will continue deeper inland, where the ground favors the defender again. But the beach is behind them now, open and alive. And it was opened by machines that were never supposed to work. The lesson written in steel. Night settles over Normandy with a deceptive calm. Fires burn low in the distance, painting the clouds orange. The constant thunder of naval guns fades, replaced by scattered small arms and the occasional distant explosion. In hedgerows and farmyards, men sleep, where they can, helmets still on, rifles within reach. The AVREs sit like dark hulks among them, engines finally, silent metal ticking as it cools. Captain Milner leans against his tank and lights a cigarette, his hands shaking now that the adrenaline has ebbed. In the dim light, he can see the scars on the armor, deep gouges, scorched paint, dents where shells struck and failed. Each mark is a conversation that never has to happen. Each one is an argument answered. Across the front, officers take stock. Maps are updated. Timetables adjusted. The invasion has not gone to plan, but something rarer has happened. In key sectors it has gone better. The cleared lanes have allowed armor and artillery ashore in numbers no defender can ignore. Momentum is building, fragile but real. By morning the reports reach higher headquarters. They are cautious, professional, but the pattern is unmistakable. Where specialized armor was used, obstacles fell quickly. Where it was not, progress stalled and casualties climbed. The language is restrained, but the implication is damning. Hobart reads the summaries in silence. He knows what they mean, not just for the campaign, but for the philosophy of war that had dismissed his ideas. The machines were not clever tricks. They were answers to specific lethal problems. And they worked because they were built for those problems without compromise. On the ground, the tanks move again at first light. New tasks, new dangers. Hedgerows are breached. Minefields cleared inland, now not just on the beach. AVREs become mobile fortresses, pushing into places infantry cannot yet survive alone. They are slow targets and indispensable at the same time. Private Carter rides for a short stretch on the rear deck of an AVRE, boots dangling, eyes scanning every shadow. He knows better than to get attached. He has already seen one of these machines burn. But he also knows that if he has to advance, he wants this weight ahead of him, breaking the ground open. German defenders adjust again, laying heavier mines, calling in artillery, focusing fire on the engineer tanks. Losses mount. But even damaged, the AVREs continue to influence the fight, forcing the enemy to react, diverting resources, buying time. In the days that follow, more beaches, more towns, more fields are opened the same way. Slowly, the specialized armor spreads its reputation. Infantry ask for it by name. Commanders plan around it. What was once an experiment becomes doctrine in motion. The weight that once terrified planners now reassures them. The complexity that drew criticism becomes precision. The idea that war could be engineered as well as fought is no longer theoretical. It is rolling forward in steel and exhaust. By the end of the week, the beachhead is firm. Supply lines hum. The breakout is being prepared. The Auxiliaries rest briefly before moving again into country that will demand even more from them. Hobart finally allows himself a moment. Not triumph, but relief. The men believed. The machines held. The gamble paid off not in glory, but in lives spared. The story will be told differently later, simplified, polished. But on the ground the lesson is already clear. Victory did not belong to the fastest or the prettiest machine. It belonged to the one that could cross the minefield when everyone else said it could not. What the minefield could not stop. Days turn into weeks, and the hedgerow war grinds on. The Auxiliaries and their sister machines become fixtures of the advanced, scarred, patched, modified in the field. Crews swap parts, salvage armor, weld on extra track links, anything that might buy another inch of survival. They are no longer curiosities. They are tools men trust with their lives. At a crossroads south of Bayou, a minefield is discovered late, its markers buried deliberately to deceive. Infantry halt instinctively. Orders crackle over the radio. An aviary is called forward. The tank rolls up without ceremony, its tracks already marked by past detonations. The first mine explodes, lifting dust and smoke. The tank does not stop. Another follows, then another. Each blast is a punctuation mark in an argument settled weeks earlier on the beach. Captain Milner watches the field disappear beneath his hull. He remembers the meetings, the doubts, the careful phrases about risk and feasibility. He remembers being told that no machine should be asked to do this. The Churchill does it anyway. Nearby, Private Carter moves forward again, stepping where the tracks have been. He is older now than he was on the beach, not in years, but in weight. He has learned what survives and what does not. He knows that courage alone is not enough, and that sometimes survival comes down to design choices made by men who will never hear his name. The Germans fall back again and again, forced to abandon positions they believed secure. Each prepared obstacle buys them less time than planned. The rhythm of defense breaks. The advance remains costly, but it continues. Far from Normandy, analysts will later dissect the landings and argue about credit. Air power, naval fire, infantry, courage, armored doctrine. But those arguments will miss the moment that matters. The moment when a tank too heavy to exist rolled into a minefield and kept moving because it had been built for nothing else. Hobart will not become a household name. His machines will not look heroic in peacetime parades. They will be dismantled, repurposed, forgotten. But for the men who followed them, they will remain the reason they lived long enough to forget. The camera pulls back now from the fields of Normandy, from the scarred hulls and tired faces. What remains is not the noise or the fire, but the quiet certainty that preparation matters. That engineering can change the shape of battle. That sometimes the thing everyone says will never work is the only thing that does. On June 6, 1944, British engineers were told the tank was too heavy. They drove it straight over the minefield anyway, and in doing so they changed how an invasion survived its first hour.